This is the story of an illusion, what looks like a glamorous display of independence. A triumphant pivot into the world of high fashion and elite lifestyle is actually something entirely different. It is a devastating metaphor for commercial desperation. In less than a few years, a woman who once held the ultimate global platform has found herself trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, frantically trying to monetize an identity that the highest echelons of the commercial world are quietly but firmly rejecting. It is the modern equivalent of a mask slipping off mid-performance, a public unraveling disguised as a fashion statement. In this video, we are going to unpack a very specific, carefully constructed public relations narrative that is about to hit the mainstream media. We will examine what happened behind the closed doors of elite fashion houses, why this specific PR pivot matters, and what the deafening silence from the world's top luxury brands reveals about the current state of the Sussex empire. More importantly, we will explore the dark psychological truth behind trying to sell a royal aura that no longer exists, and what this staggering exploitation of a title means for their future. To understand the depth of this current commercial crisis, we have to rebuild the world Meghan Markle came from and the pinnacle she eventually reached. Long before the royal wedding, there was the television show Suits. For years, she existed in a perfectly curated Hollywood environment. If you watch that show, you will notice an aesthetic of absolute superficial perfection. There are no messy desks covered in broken pencils or scattered family photos. The lighting is always pristine, the outfits are immaculate, and the reality is entirely heavily manufactured. It was a world where you could be painted to look glorious in every single shot. A simulated reality where image was absolute. When she entered the British royal family, she brought that exact expectation of curated perfection into an ancient institution that operates on duty, not lighting cues. She was handed a golden ticket to the highest tier of global influence. She had immense privilege, universal goodwill, and an unparalleled platform. She was no longer a working actress wearing borrowed clothes on a soundstage. She was a duchess, dripping in historic jewels, shaking hands with the heads of state. The contrast between that era of untouchable prestige and the current reality of desperately trying to align with commercial fashion brands makes the present situation hit with an entirely different kind of force. It is not just a career shift, it is a profound fall from grace. The narrative we were sold upon their dramatic exit from the royal family was one of liberation. We were told they were stepping back to build a progressive, billion-dollar philanthropic empire free from the constraints of the institution. But as the months turned into years, the promised global impact began to look more like a frantic scramble for relevance. The prestigious production deals stalled, the monumental interviews sparked intense moral outrage rather than universal sympathy, and the financial realities of maintaining a billionaire lifestyle without a billionaire income began to set in. This brings us to the current pivot. Behind the scenes, the strategy has shifted entirely. The new objective is to rebrand Meghan not as a global humanitarian leader, but as a lifestyle and fashion magnate. It is a return to the pristine, superficial perfection of the television soundstage. Recently, there have been subtle, highly produced glimpses into this new era. A strange, very obvious promotional plug filmed inside a luxurious celebrity closet, featuring names like Armani and other high-end designers. Then came the trip to Geneva, where it became glaringly apparent that the ultimate goal was to monetize the wardrobe. This is where the moral contradiction becomes staggering. The fundamental justification for leaving the royal family was a desperate plea for privacy and a rejection of the toxic media machinery. Yet here we see the aggressive commercialization of the very royal title they claimed was a burden. If she were operating solely as Meghan, former actress, the public interest would be negligible. It is the insistence on billing herself as Meghan, Duchess of Sussex that transforms a simple fashion plug into an act of weaponized identity. When challenged on this behind closed doors, the defense is reportedly a familiar exercise in victimhood, pointing out that Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, also commercialized her title years ago. It is an argument built on perceived unfairness rather than ethical integrity. But the actual PR disaster is what is currently being spun out to the mainstream press. In the coming days, a very specific story is going to be planted by her team. The narrative will claim that top-tier designers secretly adore Meghan Markle. The story will insist that while she may be a polarizing figure, a Marmite personality that people either fiercely love or actively dislike these elite fashion houses, are quietly thrilled when she wears their clothes because she immediately shifts stock, the spin will heavily emphasize that she does not profit from these appearances, that she does it out of a pure love for fashion, and that she single-handedly drives massive revenue for these billion-dollar companies. This is where forensic analysis destroys the Hollywood illusion. In the ruthless, purely mathematical world of high-end fashion sentimentality does not exist. If a designer truly believes a celebrity can shift stock, they do not care about their public reputation. A fashion house will sponsor a disgraced rock star, a controversial reality television personality, or a highly offensive actor if that person can guarantee a spike in global sales. If Meghan Markle wearing an Armani jacket or a Chanel blouse genuinely caused those items to fly off the shelves, she would be holding a multi-million-dollar ambassador contract by the end of the business day. They would not leave her to quietly wear their clothes for free. They would lock her into an exclusive deal to ensure she never wore a competitor's brand. Yet when industry insiders and representatives of these major fashion houses are questioned privately, the truth is laid bare. None of the top-tier luxury brands are supplying Meghan Markle with complimentary wardrobes. They are not offering her the lucrative deals that are handed out to teenage TikTok stars and mid-level Hollywood influencers. She's buying these expensive commodities herself. Let that dark psychological reality sink in. The woman who once had the royal vaults at her disposal is now privately purchasing retail luxury goods to artificially project an illusion of commercial influence, while her PR team writes stories claiming the brands are secretly profiting from her magic touch. It is a breathtaking display of vanity, masking a profound commercial isolation. The brands are perfectly happy to let her spend her own money, and they appreciate the fleeting social media mentions, but they are absolutely refusing to back her formally. This rejection hits even harder, because there is a living, breathing counterexample operating across the Atlantic. The undeniable contrast of schadenfreude lies with Catherine, Princess of Wales. With Catherine, the commercial power is tangible, immediate, and utterly effortless. Whether she wears a bespoke Alexander McQueen coat or a high-street Zara blazer, the infrastructure of those websites routinely crashes within minutes. The Kate effect is a documented economic phenomenon. More devastatingly, Catherine does not monetize this. She does not film promotional videos in her closet. She simply exists, fulfills her royal duties, and the world follows. Part of Catherine's appeal is her quiet accessibility blended with undeniable, aristocratic authority. People can visualize themselves in her aesthetic. Meghan's current highly manufactured, aggressively expensive aesthetic feels distant, forced, and inherently transactional. The impending PR story that designers love her but are just too afraid of. Her polarizing reputation, to say it publicly, is not a sign of strength. It is a white flag, it is an admission that the calls are not being returned. But this refusal from the fashion houses is not just about clothes, it is a subtle, devastating social signal that carries a much deeper meaning about how the global elite now view the Sussex brand. They have analyzed the data, they have watched the fallout of the relentless family warfare, and they have made a cold corporate decision. The illusion of her global influence is fracturing right in front of us. And what happens when a person who has staked their entire identity on being universally desired realizes that the very institutions they are trying to court have permanently locked the doors? When the doors of the global elite permanently lock, the immediate psychological response is rarely acceptance. Instead, it is a frantic doubling down on the illusion. The realization that the top-tier luxury houses are quietly rejecting the Sussex brand does not mean the aggressive PR machinery will stop. In fact, it means it is about to become much louder, much more orchestrated, and inevitably much more isolated. What we are witnessing now is not a strategic expansion, but the chaotic management of a shrinking radius of influence. And to understand the true cost of this commercial desperation, we have to look away from the curated closet tours and focus on the collateral damage standing quietly in the background of these highly produced photographs. That brings us to the devastating visual displacement of Prince Harry. When they stepped back from the royal family, the narrative sold to the world was one of unified defiance. They were supposedly walking hand in hand out of a toxic institution to build a progressive global philanthropic empire. He surrendered his military titles, severed his institutional protection, and walked away from an ancient legacy under the promise of becoming a world-changing leader. Yet fast forward to the present reality, and the visual evidence tells a staggeringly different story. He has become a silent bystander in his wife's aggressive transition into a mid-level lifestyle influencer. Look closely at the subtle social media signals and the paparazzi shots over the last year. There is a palpable disconnect. While Meghan is heavily focused on finding the lens, flashing the perfect Hollywood smile, and ensuring the unsponsored Armani jacket falls perfectly for the camera, Harry often appears physically present but psychologically vacant. The contrast is jarring. This is a man who was raised to command military regiments and represent the crown on the world stage, now finding himself reduced to a supporting character in a desperate bid to shift retail stock. The internal marriage divide here, whether publicly acknowledged or fiercely hidden, must be profound. You cannot trade the ultimate historical legacy for a commercial hustle without severe internal fracturing. This isolation is compounded by the permanent rifts back in London. In the early days of their departure, the Sussexes wielded their victimhood as a weapon. They gave devastating interviews, published intimate memoirs, and launched documentaries specifically designed to inflict maximum PR damage on the monarchy. They operated under the assumption that the palace would eventually fold, apologize, or at least engage in a highly public negotiation. But the royal family did something far more ruthless. They deployed the ultimate aristocratic weapon, absolute unbroken silence. By refusing to engage, the palace starved the Sussex narrative of its primary fuel. There is nothing left to expose. There are no more secret letters to leak or dramatic palace showdowns to recap. The victimhood well has run entirely dry, and without the constant friction of royal warfare to keep them on the front pages, they are forced to compete in the brutal, superficial arena of celebrity culture on their own merit. This is precisely why the rejection from the luxury fashion world is causing such internal panic. It exposes the terrifying reality that without the proximity to the crown, the commercial value of the Sussex title plummets. You can see this panic reflected in the subtle shifts of their social circle. The detail that truly matters is not who they are seen with, but who is noticeably absent. During their golden era, they were surrounded by A-list Hollywood royalty, billionaires, and global power players. Today, the circle has visibly tightened. The elite powerhouses have quietly distanced themselves, recognizing that aligning with a brand built on family estrangement and constant grievance is a corporate liability. Instead of rubbing shoulders with the untouchable tier of global icons, we now see highly curated appearances alongside mid-tier influencers and reality television personalities. What looked like a small shift in their social calendar is actually a significant indicator of their changing status. They are no longer curating an exclusive circle, they are simply taking whatever invitations are left. This story resonates so deeply with the public, not because of a petty interest in celebrity fashion, but because it is a modern real-time tragedy of hubris. It is a cautionary tale about what happens when you confuse public fascination with unconditional loyalty. The audience initially cared because they witnessed a fairy tale. They felt genuine empathy for a couple claiming to be crushed by an unfeeling institution. But the public is highly perceptive. They eventually recognize when a moral outrage is being artificially manufactured for profit. The contradiction of demanding absolute privacy while simultaneously filming inside your own mansion for a streaming service was simply too loud to ignore. The weaponization of their own trauma lost its emotional resonance. The moment it became clear it was merely a business model. So what happens next? As the mainstream media spin about, designers secretly loving Meghan begins to circulate. You must view it through the lens of forensic truth. It is smoke and mirrors. We will likely see the launch of a new, highly aesthetic lifestyle brand. We will see meticulously stylized posts about domestic perfection, wellness, and luxury living. The PR team will work overtime to paint this as a triumphant new chapter. But every time an expensive, unsponsored designer gown is worn to a carefully controlled micro-event, remember the psychological reality beneath the fabric. It is a performance of power from an empire running on fumes. They have burned the bridges to the most powerful institution on earth, alienated the global elite, and exhausted the public's goodwill, all to end up exactly where she started playing a role, finding her light and pretending the illusion is real. Thank you for joining me for this deep dive into the underlying architecture of this story. If you appreciate this level of forensic analysis without the tabloid noise, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Leave your thoughts below on what you think their next commercial move will truly be, and I will see you in the next breakdown.